Welcome to the Teachers Pep Rally. If you missed our last episode, we spoke to former bus driver and current specialist for student welfare, Curtis Jenkins. Check it out and do a favor, please leave us a review. Our guest is a parent and educator coach for those who are interested in building efficient operating systems to not only manage their own workloads, but to find success in supporting all students. She has over 25 years of experience in education. As a veteran principal in public schools, challenging and complex behavior had become her specialty. The more severe the problem, the more curious she becomes. I love it. Mm-hmm. Please welcome to the Teachers Pep Rally, Jen Shirley. Woohoo! Yay, welcome, Jen. And a couple things before we get started. First of all, we put Fred in a box, so if he sounds a little bit funny, don't be alarmed. And next, we've got something, Jen, that we started doing this season just to kind of get us in a certain headspace or just to be thankful. And Letitia, do you want to tell us about the Happy Happenings scenario?
Absolutely. Well, welcome again, Jen. And so Happy Happenings is just an opportunity for all of us here at the Teachers Pep Rally to share something positive that happened that we experienced during the week, maybe something that made us smile or prompted some gratitude. And then, the overall goal is to not only shine our light and share some cheer beyond the season, but to also hopefully inspire our listeners to focus on the good, because we know that this is a really important time to do that. So we're going to share our happy happenings. And Fred, I'm going to start with you because we missed you, bud.
Yeah, so I am so sorry I could not be here with everybody last week due to our water feature effect that our house undertook that day.
Oh boy.
Still working with, yeah. So anyway, actually, I have a really cool one to share. I was going to do what I was going to bring out my happy happening from last week because I wanted to share that, but this one is a good one. I want to give a shout out to teacher Jessica, who was with a group of fourth graders who downloaded my Lego Chicken Challenge. And they're one of many schools that have grabbed this download. And she shared some really, really cool pictures of the students doing this team building exercise. And I got this today and I was just responding back to her. And it just put a big smile on my face because if you saw the kids having fun with this is such a cool hands-on activity. And I just like everyone who listens, I know they know I love the hands-on building stuff, tinkering stuff. And it was just really fun to have everyone share that. So thank you, Miss Jessica. I appreciate your you're sharing those photos, and I'll get them out there on the Get Me Coding side somehow there. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Maybe we need to do that one day on TPR and see how that works.
We can make that happen. That's
okay.
The
wheels are turning. The wheels are turning. Thank you for sharing your happy happening and sharing your gift with others. I love it. Pete, what you got for us this week, bud?
I was going in a different direction, and nothing was bubbling up to the surface. And I just said, let's just go with the obvious. I am happy that I am so tired this week. I am grateful, being a music teacher, something just fell in my office, being a music teacher, that we get slammed pretty hard these couple weeks before the holidays. And just wrapping up a week of 4 events that I either had to attend or host or direct or supervise. And then between now and Saturday, I have 5 more. And then I have 2. And I was just thinking, wow, some of these things I haven't done since December of 2019. And I'm just so thankful to be tired that things have come back, that I'm able to do this instead of me being, oh gosh, I have so much, I'm thankful for it. And I'm just so happy to be able to do what we were missing for so long. So I just wanted to put that out there. Maybe somebody else will hear it and help them turn around and get through this busy time. No doubt it's tired, but it's a good tired. So I'm happy for it.
Right.
I love that. It made me happy that you turned that around, right?
There we go.
I was on the edge of my seat. What is he going to say? I love it. Aaron, what you got?
Well, first of all, that reminds me, Pete, of the old saying where it says, turn that frown upside down. So that's what I was thinking when I heard that little elementary thing. So mine is really nerdy, of course. I got a Lego Star Wars Advent Calendar, which Fred, I know you do that too. Started it last year, got a new one for this year. And it's just a little thing. I leave it to the end of the day. Of course, my friend has a preschooler who does it, so I'm in competition with him. He does it in the morning, and I like to do it at the end of the day because it just gives me something to look forward to. So, it's just like a typical advent calendar, but instead of chocolates, there's a little packet inside with some Legos, and you just put together whatever it is for the day. And it just brings me just a little joy to have that. And, Legos for me are like the new puzzle over the last couple of years. It just helps me to de-stress, focus on something. At the end, I get something cool out of it. So.
Yeah, I love doing them.
I
They're
love
fun.
that.
They're a blast there. And they really
Love
are.
that. I love that. Yeah.
And I've never heard of it. So you've expanded my thinking. Thank you for sharing your happy happening, Erin. So I think I mentioned, guys, a few weeks ago that I was gonna go see. I spontaneously bought tickets to go see Michelle Obama live on her book tour, and it was amazing. I went with my daughter, so we made it like a mother-daughter date. I even spent the night at her house.
Not Michelle Obama's.
No, not Michelle. Although I was able to join her community, and she texted me right away. So I have her number in my phone.
What?
Cool.
It was the coolest thing, but it was just wonderful. It was great to just get inspired and just be around in one space, feeling loved. Tyler Perry was hilarious.
Oh,
He
wow.
was the host. So it was just a nice
He is
evening out and just counting down to go see her. So that was my happy happening. Michelle and Najee all in one night.
Love it.
Well, Jen, we've saved the best for last. Would you like to share your happy happening?
I absolutely, I love this, by the way. We do a little round table to get the party started.
Yes.
Mine is sort of ironic and serendipitous all at the same time, and it comes from a place of total appreciation. So this throughout the month of December, I have been invited to be the third principal administrator in a school because this particular building, this is their temporary home while the new facility is being completed. So it will be ready at the end of, for the kids to move in at the end of December. The ironic part is the temporary school where I'm working is the school where I first started teaching 25 years ago.
Oh, wow.
My goodness.
So, and the layout, it's just really this full circle moment. So if you would have asked my, 25-year-old self or whatever, when I started, if this opportunity would have ever presented itself, I'd be like, what are you talking about? No.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the cool things I get to do in my current role where I can work in a different variety of schools, supporting my principal colleagues who are trying to run the building they're in while literally setting up furniture for the new building they're heading to, in the next couple of weeks. And it's total chaos, as you can imagine. But yeah, I never thought that would come full circle. And furthermore, one of my former students is a teacher on this staff. So holy moly, how does that happen?
I love it. What a wide range of happy happenings we've shared tonight. And I, again, want to encourage our listeners to take notice, be intentional about noticing the great stuff. Well, Jen, I'm excited you're here. I can't wait to get us started tonight. Erin, take it away.
Yeah, because Jen and I have talked, I know that we can just go ahead and get right into it. I'm not going to give you a softball or anything. I'm going to bring up something that I've been wanting to talk about for a while. So let's talk about this. You have said, rightfully so, parents blame teachers and teachers blame parents. We hear it all the time. Maybe we've even been someone who's done this, right? What can we as parents and or teachers do to change this so that the students are the ones that win? Let's turn it into a win-win situation. What do you think we could do?
It's such a we've all fallen into this trap and pattern, myself included, right? You're frustrated in a moment and you're like, oh, how can this improve? So you look at the other side, they look at us. And Erin, to your point, it's a lose-lose. So for me, I'm looking to really make it count when the kids are with me. So by that, I mean, I can't really control what occurs the moment that they get on the bus or get picked up or are back in the community or back at home. So I think that it's a waste to spend time, effort, and energy on that element that you can't even control. So for me, that's the first and foremost thing. They're mine when they're with me, so let's make it count. And then I always am curious about the backstory, about sometimes those families who are really speak poorly of the school or the schools or the educator. I always want to know what's their backstory. So in other words, there's probably a good reason why they may speak that way or why they may have that point of view. And if you have the relationship or if you have the opportunity, sometimes it's worthwhile to ask that question, where you're literally going to say, hey, you know what? I've noticed you've often said this, or you seem to be not enjoying this particular school experience for you or your child. Do you want to tell me about that? Because maybe it could help me understand what not to do, because I don't really want to be the person repeating the reason why they continue to speak poorly about the school, the teacher, the system, whatever the case may be. So for me, I'm always wanting to know more about why they feel that way. And then, sort of in the opposite direction, I think we have to stop doing that as educators. And when we are overhearing our colleagues who are speaking poorly about a family circumstance, I think we got to call them out on it and just say, that's not helpful. We don't really know why they say that. We don't really know, the all the series of events that have perpetuated that person's opinion, and our roles to stand in their shoes for just a quick minute and really look at it differently. And I also think that's really slippery because the students feel that tension.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be able to articulate it. Well, sometimes they do, right? If they're little enough, they're going to be like, this is what my mom said about you. But we've all been on the receiving end of that. So it's just not the tone or the flow or vibe that you would want to give off. So I think there's those few things would really improve, not having that us against them. It's not what we want.
I think, Jen, first of all, what you've said is so rich, and we can take this in so many different directions, right? But
Thank you.
But I'm reminded of two things that I was very serious about as a teacher, and that's I would never look at student records, behavior, grades, anything. I would give myself opportunity to learn their backstory, to learn from them. Yeah. And I had a reputation because you know how we do. Did you get Johnny so-and-so? Is he on your class list this year? And they want to tell you, all the laundry list of things, right? So that's one. But I'm also reminded of a time where that actually happened. And I did approach a parent and I got to learn their backstory and their negative experiences as students.
Yeah.
Right. And so they bring that in as parents. And then, we have a tendency of using this educational jargon and everything is sophisticated and educated. And we forget that everybody is not there. And so that also creates a wall. And so I love that what I'm hearing is this idea of compassion, and non-judgment, and just being curious enough to ask the question in love to get to the bottom and reach a win-win.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, your point is so well taken, Letitia, because it coming into the school for some families is super intimidating. Sometimes you can't even get them to come in. And if you can get them to talk to the classroom teacher, that's a bonus. A lot of them don't want to ever talk to me because they've had a terrible go round. So I love just speaking to them in a way that's making them feel really comfortable, because the jargony stuff, the
Buzzwords, right?
Mhm.
the buzzwords, right? It's intimidating and it's not for everybody. So I think that's an important point too.
I think, Jen, too, you're tapping into some emotional intelligence. At least let's put on the educator's side a little bit, taking that moment of, instead of us, and it's hard, instead of us getting so worked up and so feeling attacked, and this is all about me, and you're questioning my profession and what I'm doing, take a moment to realize what your body's going through as you're feeling that, because you may or may not be really being attacked, and then
Correct.
have these honest conversations, or have the opportunity to be professional and just saying, okay, maybe something else is going on here, or I'm actually going to give an example. For some reason, this keeps coming up this week, and I keep thinking about a situation I was in years ago, and I'll share it with you all real quickly. I had a student we just had a very difficult time building a relationship in the classroom. There was always never knew what was going to come out of this student's mouth. It seemed like if I made any kind of mistake or stumbled, that was always highlighted, made a big deal out of. Let's try to catch Miss King at a bad moment, and let's try to get her. That's what it felt like to me all the time. But every day, new day, every day, new day. And then the parent had some things they wanted to talk to me about. So we had a couple of different parent-teacher meetings. And at one point, the parent was not happy and went to my principal. And the principal said, well, who's the teacher? And they said, well, I'll tell you, I'm very surprised because this teacher is known for a lot of communication and working out. Let's meet. Let's the three of us meet. So here we are, the principal, the parent, and myself meeting, and we're talking, and I'm trying to get to what is this parent's concern so that I could help them, help their child in any way. And it just wasn't going very well, the conversation. And finally, at one point, the principal got a call and there was something emergency, had to leave. So now it's just me and this parent. And I'm thinking, okay, now it's just the two of us. Let's just get down to the real deal. What's going on?
No.
And we never did. And this was the only time it happened. And at one point, I finally looked at the parent and said, I think this is a time where we're both going to have to just say, we don't agree with what the other one is saying. And I'm not quite sure what else to say or do in this time, other than if you want to try to work something out together. I think we're done here, but I will tell you that I will continue to be what I hope is a good teacher for your child. I'm not going to make this change the way that I am with them. And I just left it at that, and I got up and walked away. And that was it.
And they didn't throw a shoe at the back of your head or anything like that?
No.
Oh,
No.
man.
And I
That's
just
nice.
had to accept maybe this person, for whatever reason, whatever experience they've had in the past, or maybe they just didn't like me. I read something about that today too. Sometimes people just don't like you. Sometimes we don't like people, and that's okay. But
yeah,
we can still be professional, I think, Jen, is kind of what you're saying, right? Especially when it's our time with the kids, with the students.
I think so. And I don't think it's up to us to own that parent response either.
Mm.
So many educators internalize the response, or whether it's poor or a strong, or that like usually doesn't have anything to do with you or I. So I think if you're professional and sometimes candid, direct, you're going to just sort of say, let's leave it there for now, and I wish you a great afternoon.
That's what I did, Fred. And I was like, oh, I was shaking the rest of the day. But
I can imagine.
looking back now, that's how we ended it. Nothing ever came up again, and we moved on.
Yeah.
But I really like hearing that. I like hearing how you're doing that in those age groups. And that as you were saying all that, and Aaron, you were telling that story, there was two things that popped into my head. One was first generation college, because that's the mindset you have to go at the first generation student, right? They're coming into the space not having any experience. Their family has no experience of what the college classroom is like. So they are intimidated by it. And you really do have to, at least from the freshman year, right? You have to really put them at ease. And then the other term that popped into my head though was advocating. I think when you were saying some of that, it reminded me of a similar conversation, getting called in, not with a principal, but with a chief academic officer, and sitting down with a parent, and the parent telling us that while the 18-year-old is sitting there, that they are a good student and they are a good team student. And in the meantime, the student's just sitting there, 18 years old. And I felt like that kid all through his life had probably a parent, maybe not so much advocating, but definitely speaking for him like you're talking about. And no one ever kind of took that opportunity that you took, Aaron, to kind of say, this is where it is. That's not happening enough, I don't think. But those are just some thoughts that were going through my mind as you were saying all that, because like, once again, I'm at the other end of this. And as we let things go K through 12, it eventually pops up in the college classroom. And then there are parents that definitely take that attitude, and they somehow, you could just see it in the body language in a college freshman. They're not buying into this because their parents didn't buy into it. So why should I buy into this? In the meantime, the meter's running and they're paying for it, and they're paying a lot for it. And then they want to blame everybody else that, didn't work out. It's interesting.
Well, Fred, I'll raise the ante with you on that one. So I'm a recruiter at this time, and I have a parent calling, advocating for their teacher child. The parent called HR, and about application and trying to get instructions and all of this, right? And so I'll piggyback on Jen's comment, right? That the longer we stay in the game, or at least the longer I've stayed in the game, not only do we don't have the right to own the response of the parent, I'll take it a step further and say we don't have the right, or we should not take the own the parenting. Because I know I spent a lot of thinking and a lot of emotional currency and energy on what is going on. How could this kid be 18 and the parent is here and now I want to be a parent? I think we have to narrow in the energy and make it count. Like Jen said, right? Like when they're with us, we're there to teach and maybe life skills and, emotional support, if you will, but not parenting.
Yeah. And I think, Jen, I think what we're getting at is that it's really hard to be an educator. And we don't shy away from that. We love to celebrate this profession. But at the same time, we, as Fred always says, it's like a peek behind the curtain. So what would you say we should do, or what are some things that can help us as educators when dealing with our students who have all kinds of different personalities, or sometimes they're having a bad day, without us feeling we have to be parenting? Because I think Letitia has a good point, but that we're trying not to create a situation where there's conceived confrontation with the student. How do we balance that? What do you think?
It's so hard, right? Because depending on where you are, what grade level you're at in terms of your instruction, so the age of your students matters a ton. And then it also matters a ton what kind of a relationship or rapport you have with the individual kids, then the group of kids. So none of this goes well if you don't know those kids in front of you. So by that, I mean, you got to know if I'll use an example that's an easy one for me. Let's just talk about an 8th grade homeroom, because that's what I love. I love those intermediate kids. People think I'm nuts for it, but I love that group of kids.
Yeah, let's get into middle school. That's nice.
You got to know which strategies are going to work for which types of students that are in front of you, because what's going to work for some will cause another student to crash and burn or retreat or withdraw. So you got to know that. And so that has to come first and foremost, in my view. And I also think that we go too fast, and we're trying to get through so much from an instructional point of view. So, you know, the barrage of curriculum expectations you got to roll through. And then you're also juggling extracurriculars, because perhaps you're like Pete, running a band or a music program, or you're coaching a team, or whatever the case may be. So we, the adults, are on speed dial all the time. So because we're going quickly, it then means for the students to possibly misinterpret, misunderstand, or misperceive A, what we're trying to accomplish, or B, the messaging. So I also think that some kids they really struggle badly, or they're poor at reading gestures and body language. So because we're flying around going a million miles an hour, they might miss the fact that maybe I was trying to be sarcastic or funny, and they didn't realize that it was meant to be that way. And they took it at face value. And then, you know, all of those assumptions, the biases that we think that, you know, because a group of kids is in grade 8, we make all these assumptions that they should be able to process or manage whatever we're discussing. And we all know that any kind of student who has perhaps a special education profile, maybe they have a language disability, their processing speed is slow, they're still trying to figure out to follow the conversation. Meanwhile, you know, the other group of kids, they're 17 steps ahead. They've got the solution already laid out. So that student's now left behind. And when you miss key points of the conversation, many kids draw their own conclusion or draw their own judgment. So then we have this big kerfuffle, possibly for no reason, because
that's a great word.
Kerfuffle, that's
That's
that
a
new
great
one,
word.
Brad?
I like that one. I like that one.
So what we intended and what our impact was, they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, you know? So if we approach it from the way where we're always looking to de-escalate and be super clear with our messaging, so that means going slow, that means clarifying for understanding, that means presenting it in a whole whack of different manners so that those different differentiated kids are getting what they need. And, you know, like I said about the sarcasm or the humor, the delivery of the messaging is equally as important, because sometimes the delivery is awful. We're in a rush, like I was saying. We haven't eaten. You got to use the washroom. There's nobody around, whatever the case may be.
You had too much coffee.
That happens a lot, right? So, I mean, I also think too, like, trying to mitigate some of those confrontations and conflicts, I've started to spend a lot of time with kids teaching them how to argue. And I know this seems maybe surface level, but many of them have never really experienced how to advocate, how to argue, how to assert themselves, never mind calling the other person by some horrible name and then saying, I'm right, you're wrong, you're this, and I'm leaving. We have to sometimes model how to have that messy, ugly discussion and conversation, because it's possible they've never had that ever.
Wow, you're hitting on so many things that we have just had some discussions on. The speed dial comment. I was sitting with one of my peers professor for a very long time. He didn't call it speed dial. He called it the 24/7. We're in 24/7 mode as educators, and then we have this expectation now that college students should be the same thing. But in the meantime, they're also trying to figure out how do they juggle life, caring for family members, and so on. So when you said that, I was immediately going to that. But boy, yeah, I got to think about that for a second for what you just said. But that is really, really the how do you say it? That's the problem. Like you hit it right on the head. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that for a moment until I gather my thoughts.
Yeah.
Jen, it is so refreshing and awesome to hear a school leader speaking the way you're speaking and saying what you're saying. I just want to
thank
give
you,
you a big
Pete.
hug through. And I'm wondering, how do you convey this approach, your expectations to your team? And how do you hold them accountable on the way? How does this work in your building with your team and your staff?
Holy, nothing like a loaded question. Pete.
Sorry. Two hugs. Sorry.
That's okay. You know something, a couple of things come to mind there for me right off the bat. I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin. So I know there's certain things for me. I know exactly where I stand on that issue. So that really helps a lot. Like, I'll give you an example of what I mean. And if I'm having a staff meeting with, a full faculty meeting with 60 educators or however many there are, I put those things out onto the table. So, here's what it looks like, sounds like, and feels like. And guys, here are some of the things that I really won't support. As an example, if you come to me and I've learned that you've pulled a student's phys ed class as a consequence for something that went wrong, for some kind of behavior intervention, you and I are going to have a conversation about that, because I'm not going to support that. If some of those really simple, when I arrive to school in the morning, I want you to say, "Hey, Jen, good morning." Mm-hmm. Sometimes I have to say that to people. I don't want it to be, Fred, like what you just said about the 24/7. Sometimes it's just one big run-on sentence. We're continuing where the conversation left off at the end of the day yesterday. And I have to just go, "Hey, good morning. How's it going?" And it seems so silly and goofy. Another one is, when I'm speaking to kids and something's gone really terribly wrong, and, I'm having to call home because we're needing a parent support, I'll say to them, "Who do you prefer I call? Would you like me to call mom or dad?" And I say that so that the staff hear me modeling how that's going to go, because I know darn well the kid has a preference of who he wants me to call or she wants me to call first. So I think the clarity of establishing those things on the front end, from a prevention point of view, rather than after things have gone totally off of the rails, I think it goes a really long way. And they really appreciate knowing, like, okay, I know exactly where she stands on the phys ed issue. So let's brainstorm another way about how to figure it out for this student.
Yeah, Jen. And the word that keeps coming up for me as we just moving on in our conversation tonight is this idea of self-awareness. I just believe that we spend too much time on professional development and not enough time on personal development. Right?
Oh, now you're speaking my language.
Right? So when I'm coaching a teacher, we're going through values, and I'm telling you, many adults don't know what they value really, can't articulate that. We have challenges with boundaries.
Oh boy, do we ever.
We don't know how to set boundaries at home or at work. So having critical conversation is not going to happen if you are a people pleaser. right? So I just feel like the same level of self-awareness that we're almost expecting children to have, the adults desperately need that as well, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm
I'm-
sorry.
I love what you said about it being personal development rather than professional development, because in my view, that area is lacking really, it's really lacking where I work. And Erin, you and I spoke about this the first time we talked about all the things that young educators get themselves in trouble for. And here's an example of one of those things. A staff member came to me and said, well, I worked really hard on this email I want to send to a parent. Would you mind proofreading it for me before I press send? I go, okay, well, this is a positive thing. And then I read through the message and I was like, there is no way that you're putting this in an email, because I am now going to coach you about how to pick up the phone and call this parent. Some of these young educators are really uncomfortable with
Oh boy, face to face.
So Fred, I know you're like, oh yeah, the wheels are turning here. Like, so she spent 40 minutes crafting this beautifully written email. And what I said to her was, now I want you to call and you're going to spend 10 minutes on the phone. This parent is going to hear your voice and you're going, and I'll help you with the call. There's a framework that I'm going to model for you. I'm happy to do that. But this is a skill that you must have, because the educator was way more comfortable to hide behind the keyboard. And then we were still going to be nowhere once the email would have been sent. So, so I could go on and on for that, because our young educators are really at a deficit in many, many of those kinds of areas.
Hearing you say that, I'm hoping that programs that are creating these teachers are making these observations and they're introducing these techniques into the classroom somewhere along the line, because you're right, it's a generational thing. I want to say, as a geek, I want to say about 30 years ago, IBM started to notice that their technical people were having some issues with this topic. And they reintroduced into early onboarding how to handshake, how to have a sit-down meeting, how to go to lunch with somebody. That was 35 years ago. And now here we are. I would like to say something positive, though, in light of COVID. So there was an assignment that I gave again for my third year. It started during COVID. It was the Choose the Good assignment, Erin, where the students had to do a 60-second video where they talked about choosing the good, something good. And once again, this third year, I saw something that I'll be honest, my generation, we weren't aware of. Like, we just didn't see it. We weren't aware of self-help and self-awareness, I don't think, as much as we are today. They were all picking up on these notions, and they were aware of that, the fact that they had to do more interacting with each other. They realized that they were buttoned up, and now they have to get back out. And I was watching these videos, and it really made me feel good, because sometimes you can watch those videos and you feel like they're going to go off the deep end. So hopefully there maybe that's going to be a positive out of COVID. I hope maybe COVID didn't reinforce some of that stuff. Maybe the hunger to be connecting again is surfaced, and now, but we have to facilitate it, though. We can't just slough it off either, or turn it into a big kerfuffle.
I love that word. So Jen, I'm so excited that we have a principal, a building leader on tonight, because it's a tough job, and I love this idea that you have about accountability and support, right? Like, how can we hold our staff accountable, but also in a supportive environment? And as we talked about, and you shared how one of the ways that you model, I guess, even accountability, is by knowing and modeling what your non-negotiables are, right? Like, if you take away PE, I'm not going to support that. Can you maybe share with our listeners, particularly our building leaders, how they can create an environment where a teacher, because I come across this in my coaching, how a teacher can become comfortable with sharing his or her non-negotiables to her building leader without the fear of retribution, right? Like my principal emailed me at 3 a.m. and I feel like I have to respond. That's a serious boundary, but I'm just curious what your take is about, creating an environment where teachers feel safe to also share with the leader.
Yeah, that's a tough one because they often operate from a place of fear or worry or a judgment, a fear of being judged from the point of view of having a disappointing performance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that becomes my job then to take all of that off of the table for them. And it comes down to the type of conversation that we're going to have. So the delivery, the body language, how I introduce the conversation. So nothing is more intimidating sometimes for an educator where, if I, as the leader, say, hey, it's the end of the day, can you drop by and see me for a few minutes? And you leave it open-ended like that, that puts, it gets sent, it sends the blood pressure flying high. So I would say, here's what I'd love to speak about. It's this, and this. And I just want to know where you stand on some of these things so that I can figure out how to support you. Because if I don't know where you're at, or if you don't know where you're at, then at least I know where we have to begin the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Because, the year 4 educator down the hall and the person who just started in the building last week and the person who's been in the same classroom for 27 years in the same building, they're all going to have different requirements for job performance, accountability, and then being able to move them forward in a personal development way or in a professional way.
Yeah, I think, Letitia, that's such a great question, because I'm even just thinking about the school leader side. And a lot of times it's hard to remember all the things a principal or an assistant principal also has to balance, and all the different characters and personalities that they're trying to navigate or support. I wrote a blog a couple years ago about the idea of what if we did a day where we wrote, either you could do it with your students or with your staff, a manual for you, like really start thinking about what makes you tick, what works for you, what if there's something isn't going right, what is a way to fix it, like, and then as we start to think of it in that way, then it's a little bit easier maybe to voice that to our school leaders or to our peers. You know what, I prefer that when we talk that we do it face to face instead of it being in an email, because it's hard for me to read tone. And I like to kind of have a two-way conversation versus one way, something like that.
Yeah. And so that's that word again, Erin, self-awareness, right?
Yes.
Giving yourself permission to learn what makes you tick. And then I love that idea, right? And then you're able to articulate it. And, to the point about leaders, I've never been a building leader in that way, but I've spoken to hundreds of principals when I would go around and meet with them. And I found in just my conversations with them that principals that understood that they were working in a system that was compliance driven, like them being aware that, hey, this is the environment that I'm in, and then making the courageous decision to say that might be it, but this is what's important in my building. And I will deal with central office or whoever is, putting that pressure on me. I just found that those principles, the culture and climate, the turnover was not as robust because they understood that the needs of the building, their staff, to Jen's point, knowing who's in your building, made all the difference in the world. So, I love our leaders, and I know that they can't give what they don't have, but, I did notice that those that said, no, I'm not
This,
doing that.
that you keep using the word leader, Letitia, and this goes back to the conversation we had several weeks ago with the name slipped my
Ashley.
mind. Ashley, right? And I don't have a formal education background, so I don't know what goes on or how teachers are prepared. Do you have a class that's actually dedicated to introducing the concepts of leadership? Because a lot of the things you were also saying, Jen. So I have a military background, and everything you all are using the word modeling, and every time you say that, my brain's transforming that into leadership by example.
Yeah.
So leadership, but if you don't know these techniques, if you're never introduced to anything in a leadership framework, how do you expect? You're expecting something that I think is a big reach in the education space, right? Because it's the same thing in the military space. We would have these conversations if you were an officer, and you would be asked, look at the commercial. So for me, it was the Marine Corps. You'd see the knight riding the dragon. He slays the dragon. Well, that doesn't happen in the real world, but it's a neat visual. But one of the things we always struggled with was once we got into the job, now we had to kind of retain, but we were never taught to how to retain. We were taught to be leaders, but we were ill prepared to do other parts of our job. And I kind of wonder how much are you assuming that teachers, whether they're K through 12 or even definitely in higher ed, I see it all the time, but in K through 12, you're expecting them to have these natural abilities that were never developed, but yet as a principal, you're trying now to prepare them when they should have been prepared before they even entered the classroom. It seems like that's as we have more of these conversations, and I made that comment the one day about, do teachers look at themselves as leaders? Well, if you're never brought in through a pipeline with that expectation, and you never had that kind of background, why would you think you're a leader? Just because you're the person in front of the class physically? I don't know. I think it feels like we're setting people up.
Yeah, and I
Anyway.
think that's why Jen is such a great guest, and hopefully someone will continue to talk to, because
Yeah,
that's exactly what she's doing, right?
that's awesome. That's
She's
what you need to do.
she's supporting educators, and Jen, I'll let you, because this is your thing, but I feel like that's what you're trying to do, right?
Yeah, I mean, the all of these underpinning things that we think should just be automatic
Right.
are not necessarily there. We presume or assume that staff can manage a classroom behaviorally. I'm here to tell you, many cannot. I'm also their ability to communicate sometimes is it comes from a place of hesitation. Letitia, you mentioned something a little while ago about boundaries. Well, they have no ability to say no sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
So the burnout then starts to happen. The exhaustion starts to set in. They feel bombarded by messaging coming from parents where they feel that they've got to respond lightning fast to an inquiry that comes in. So I talk to them a lot about workflow, about pace, about workload, about difficult conversations, about how to regulate your own emotions. Again, Fred, something you just said a second ago, it reminded me of this. My job as one of the school leaders is to clear away some of those barriers for my team. So our school board office, we have requirements that are must do's, and sometimes there's some wiggle room about how that can be done. So my job is to really simplify that, because I know the first or second year teacher who barely has their head above the water because they're struggling to cope day to day. Their reality, their buffer for time is like right here. They're not strategically planning 4 weeks out. They're like, oh God, I hope the photocopier works for my lesson this afternoon. You know, like it's just not how they operate. So, and it's my job to know that and remember what that was like for me, because they're, and the same thing holds true when I'm coaching a new admin partner. So I've had lots of really intelligent vice principal partners in the years that I've worked. And when they arrive, they think the job is this, and they quickly learn that it's actually this. So my job is to say, I don't want you to worry about all of this. Here are the 2 things that you're going to concentrate on from September until December. And here they are. You're going to get to know the staff and kids, number 1. Number 2, you're going to make sure that we are staffed, that all the classes are covered day in and day out. The rest, I don't even want you to think about it.
That's a nice clear direction. That's what a leader does.
And my visual now, Fred, is the military analogy you gave. I now see Jen riding the dragon through the school.
Oh Lord.
Getting rid of those barriers.
I like it. I love it. I love it.
Oh Lord. We'll send you the artwork. Don't worry about it. We got you.
Yeah, no, Jen, I think I definitely think you're a path to greatness here for
I'm
that.
onto
That's like,
something.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Jen,
a good model.
So now I'm curious, because I know we could keep you forever and a day.
Yeah.
Who's a teacher, coach, mentor, someone that gave you some of this inspiration or a little spark or anything that you want to shout out and share with us?
I would be remiss if I didn't mention to you a really impactful woman who taught phys ed. So my degree is a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology. Yeah, I played collegiate sports as well. So jock here, and I make no apologies for it.
Don't.
Her name was Anne McNeil, and we called her Miss Mac as students. She coached and taught until the cows came home in the small town where I grew up, just outside of Ottawa. And it was really her love of being in front of kids in the gym. It was enthusiastic. You could tell she was having as much fun as we were. And what struck me now is the gift, how generous she was with her time and with her spirit. And she had this wild sense of humor. She drove, well, it was back then where you could drive kids in your own car. You can't do that anymore here. So, well, not very often anyway. She drove us all over the place to compete in events and tournaments, and it was really a sense of that community and where you really fit in and started to belong. And I was like, this is too cool, and I think that's probably the direction that I'm going to go. And I'm not the only one. There were many of us who she influenced in that manner. She's been retired for a very long time, and still wins ladies senior golf championships at the golf club where she plays. And she shoots her age, I'm sure of it, because that's how great she is. And it's just a really cool story, You
should reach out to her. You need to reach out to her.
Awesome.
I'm connected to her every now and again, but she's one of those ladies where, when you haven't spoken to a person in 1,000 years and you just pick up where you left off. But that's her. That's her.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. So now we're going to go through and kind of talk about, this is one of our parts that we just kind of say, hey, these are some things that we kind of thought of, or something that you said that was an aha moment for us. So we're going to go through each of us, and then Jen, you as our guest, kind of get the last word, any last thoughts or something from tonight's conversation that you want to share. Does that sound okay?
That sounds cool.
Okay. Pete, I'm going to call on you first.
Oh, look at that. So let's see. I wrote down, I put a whole bunch of things together and summed it up. So much of what we think that is automatic is simply not there yet. And you got to know what strategies will work best for which students, families, and ourselves. So that's that. Sums it up. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Pete. All right, Letitia.
Ooh, okay. First off, Jen, I want to let our audience know that when you give your info, they need to sign up for your newsletter and read your blogs because you have some awesome content out there. My favorite is that you shoot from the hip. You are a shoot from the hip coach. I love that.
That's very true. I'm not one to mince words too often.
I love it. And I don't have one specific quote, but just the way that you navigate this work, I think is so impressive and stood with me. And you mentioned this idea of that we can't control the kids when they're on the bus, what happens outside of our, I guess, our time with the children, right? But we can control how we engage with them, how we teach. But you even take it a step further. You say we can control how we lead. We can control how we lead. And so I just thought that was so encouraging. Sometimes we forget that we do have choice, right? And that we are very influential. Educators have great influence. So thank you for the work that you're doing and for shooting from the hip.
Nice. All right, Fred.
Yeah, Jen, thanks for being here tonight. Yeah, Letitia hit the couple of key things that I was going to touch on, and they were excellent. So I have three. First of all, it has to be kapoplo, best word ever. I just like the feel of it. I like to say it. That's a hashtag. Your first thing right when you set off today's tone with circling or going full circle, a full circle moment. I think that's a really cool thing for you to just appreciate where you are. 25 years or whatever, someone in your career, 30 years, we're all at that space, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it is neat. And I think I just remind you to make sure that you enjoy it. That's something that's earned. If you have that ability to kind of come back to where you began, because that's where my career is. And I walk down the hallways, there's certain smells that are still there that I can remember when I was there many years ago, oddly enough. So it's neat. But I think I think Pete, you said it in one way. And I'm boiling it down to empathy, but you were talking about getting the backstory. And that's been a reoccurring theme with a lot of the guests we've had over the years, with being in the moment, getting to know your students, knowing what's driving them, just taking that time. If you take that and make that investment, which a lot of people don't do because they think it's not a waste of time, but they got to get to something else. They got to move on. I think that's an investment that has a great return. And you obviously realize that, and I'm so happy to hear that you share that kind of mentality also with your teachers too. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Fred. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking a lot about things that remind me our society, just being teachers in general, the schedule, everything's always so fast. And even after the pandemic, it just seems like, oh, we got to catch up. There's learning gaps. We got to get ready for this standardized. It just feels like everything's so fast. So I like that you just kind of kept it real simple and said, go slow. Go slow. I think a lot of times we forget that and we get caught up. And whether it's in the moment or as I still do the teacher, I'm always rushing to get in the building. I'm like, what am I doing? I think it's the fact that of not being able to use the restroom all day. You just get into that habit of going. But I'll just find myself, even in my personal life, I'm on like a speed walker for no reason. Where am I rushing to? So go slow, people.
I love it.
Thanks, Jen, for being here. And as I said, you as our guest, do you have any last thoughts or anything that from our conversation tonight?
No, I just wanted to say thanks a million for having me. This was super fun. And, it's funny because there's so many similarities for what we're experiencing, despite the fact that we're working nowhere near one another, and we also are working with kids who are K to 12 and then post-secondary college. And then, from a staff point of view in your role, Letitia, where it's like, you're now working with adults, and those reoccurring themes or challenges come up really no matter where we seem to be.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so fun, because of course, everyone has a point of reference about how their experience was in school. And I'm always curious to hear a person's point of view, hey, this is where you're working. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. Now, I want to hear about your story.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I'm a backstory biography kind of girl anyway. So there's a lot of cool things to learn about the people who are working with our kids.
Absolutely. Oh, great. Well, Jen, if people want to connect with you, how can they find you?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Erin. So my two biggest my chosen platforms, if you will, are mainly LinkedIn and Twitter. And my Twitter handle is at Jen_Shirley. And again, just through the website, I invite people to go have a peek. And that is at www.jenshirley.com. And there's a lot of free stuff there, where there's I think I'm on version 17 or 18 of my weekly newsletter, and I'm really enjoying doing that craft of writing. So check it out. That'd be great.
Great. And while you're there, make sure to check out her blog about first year teachers or young
Yes.
teachers, because it hits the mark. I'll just say that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
And Pete, where can our listeners find us?
Connect with us. Keep the conversation going. We have our Facebook group, Instagram, YouTube, and our website, teacherpeprally.com. And wherever you're listening to us, please leave us a review. That really helps.
Awesome. Well, Jen, thank you again. And as Fred was mentioning about full circle, I hope that we circle back to you sometime in the near future to continue these conversations. But in the meantime, thanks for coming.
I would love that. And thanks a million for having me.